One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
As Strictly Come Dancing approaches its iconic Blackpool episode, marking halfway through the competition, visually impaired dancers across the country have spoken out about how groundbreaking the casting of Chris McCausland is, who suffers from, if I hope I'm saying this correctly, retinitis pigmentosa, and they've found him particularly inspiring. We've been talking, Sean, about how the casting of Strictly has been inspiring to so many people, but I imagine there'll be lots of people who are watching this at home finding your story of resilience really inspiring, because you've obviously really been through it. Is dancing something that has sort of, you know, helped keep you going through all of those troubles? And what does it mean to you to see casting like this on a show like Strictly Come Dancing?
Like I say, all the things I went through. So those 9 years when I wasn't dancing, you know, I was still dancing in my head and just banging on to other people. Very much not just people with sight loss. You know, I've been a big advocate for people with social isolation. So many people on their own now, social anxiety, especially since COVID. And I just want people to get out. The stuff that I'm doing and all the stuff Chris is obviously doing, it will inspire others. Again, like I say, just not people just with sight loss. I had so many people come up to me in the early days, guys, and now that say, you know what, Shawnee, I've seen you do it, so I'm just going to do it. But you just got to get over yourself, because if you bother to do the maths, you know, because all it is maths and walking. Yeah. You know, that's all it is.
Maths and walking actually sounds quite difficult.
Sean, thank you.
Oh, come on, mate. Can you shout? Can you walk? Crack on.
Sean, you're an inspiration. Thank you, mate, for joining us this morning. Really appreciate it. You're a star, and so glad.
Just before I go, I'm just going to say, this is Kev. Here's Kev.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Very good evening. You're with GB News. The top stories from the newsroom tonight. Well, the King and Prime Minister have paid tribute to the victims of a devastating plane crash in South Korea that claimed the lives of 179 people, including, sadly, a 3-year-old boy. King Charles described the loss as profoundly saddening, offering prayers for the victims' families and loved ones. Footage showed the Boeing jet landing without wheels before skidding off the runway, crashing into a wall and bursting into flames. 2 crew members were pulled to safety and are now conscious, according to officials. The crash is one of South Korea's deadliest air disasters, and investigations are now underway into whether a bird strike may have caused the gear failure. Well, travel and aviation expert Sally Gethin has been speaking to us today about the events that may have led to that crash.
Seems to have suffered a catastrophic bird strike, which might sound nothing in the scheme of things, but actually, when you consider the powerful engines on board, any bird strike is very critical in a case like this. And that triggered a chain of events where the pilots could not keep in control. They could not deploy the landing gear in time. And then they ran out of runway effectively at that point. They skidded off the runway and they ran right into a wall. They have recovered one of the black boxes. Once they've recovered both black boxes, the investigation will begin properly.
The fatal crash of an Azerbaijan Airlines plane over Russia was caused by shooting from the ground, according to the country's president. He's criticised Russian officials for trying to hush up the truth about the crash, accusing them of sowing false narratives. It comes after President Vladimir Putin apologised for what he called the tragic incident after Russian air defences fired on the plane. Here, the UK government has dismissed that apology from Putin, calling for a full investigation. The government says that ruthless criminals are responsible for the deaths of 3 migrants after a small boat capsized this morning A major rescue operation near Calais saved 45 others, with 4 still in hospital. Authorities are also warning the death toll could rise further. It follows news that over 1,300 migrants have now crossed the Channel since Christmas Day, despite the government's promise to smash the gangs. 7 people have been arrested after an 18-year-old man was fatally stabbed in Derbyshire on Saturday night. Police found the victim on Rose Avenue, but despite emergency efforts, he died nearby. Among those arrested are 4 17-year-old boys. Detectives are now treating the case as isolated and appealing for any help from those in the area. And wet winter weather is looming as the UK braces for rain, snow and heavy winds this new year. Yellow warnings are covering Northern Ireland, Northern England and Scotland from Monday, extending nationwide by midweek. Heavy rain could also bring flooding and areas facing up to 10 centimetres of snow. Well, those are the latest headlines for now. Up next is Chris Hope in for Camilla.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Morning and welcome to the Camilla Tominey Show with me, Christopher Hope. Now, we've got a brilliant show lined up for you this morning. Reform UK's candidate to be mayor in Lincolnshire, Dame Andrea Jenkins, tells all as Kemi Badenoch's feud with Nigel Farage has taken an ugly turn, with the Tory leader now calling for GB News, that's right, us, to reduce Nigel Farage's airtime. Former Secretary of State for Defence Liam Fox is joining us in the studio to review what's been another turbulent year for war in Ukraine with Russia and the Middle East. With the West ever more involved and President-elect Donald Trump's promises for peace, we'll look at what the UK's role will be on the global stage. Labour peer Lord Foulkes, that's George Foulkes, reacts to the Treasury's funding boost for thousands of state schools as private schools face a 20% cut in increase in VAT on school fees from New Year's Day on Wednesday next week. And as British businesses come together to provide prosthetics for injured children in the Gazan war, Edward Hall and Nicholas Mello from Restoring Hope will be joining me here in the studio. Now, Russian President Vladimir Putin has told Azerbaijan he's sorry after 38 people were killed in a plane crash in Kazakhstan. It comes as the war in Ukraine intensified this year with the deployment of North Korean troops, and fighting in the Middle East has also escalated in Gaza and Syria with the fall of Assad. Now, to reflect on the year in defence and look into what could be a difficult year for world peace is former Secretary of State for Defence Sir Liam Fox, who joins me now. Sir Liam, welcome to GB News.
Morning.
What do you make of this apology, or is it not an apology, from Vladimir Putin over the crash in Azerbaijan?
Well, when is sorry not sorry? He said he was sorry it happened in Russian airspace, but there was no indication of where culpability for this lay. And this is an occasion where I don't think this is about blaming Russia. It's a question of safety. How safe is it for civilian airliners to fly into Russia if it can't differentiate between a Ukrainian drone and a passenger aircraft?
Exactly right. I mean, it's very rare you hear that kind of contrition from Vladimir Putin.
Well, if he wanted to say sorry, he should be saying sorry for starting a war in Ukraine, in which, tens of thousands of people, civilians as well as military, have died for no reason other than Putin's vanity.
Where do you see that ending? We have Donald Trump becoming the president in 3 weeks' time. He says he'll end the war on day one. We'll wait and see if that happens. What would peace look like? I mean, freezing the gains right now hands victory to Putin, right?
Well, you have to go back to, how did we get into this position, which is, I think, a failure of deterrence. When Putin went in...
By your government in 2014 over Crimea.
When Putin went into Georgia in 2008, before we came to government, not very much, if anything, was done. When Putin went into Crimea, as you say, in 2014, nothing was really done. Putin saw this as a sign that the West wouldn't react if he went into Ukraine. I mean, there is the question of not looking at UK politics, because there's a danger of being UK-centric in this. All three of those, 2008, 2014, 2022, were all Democratic presidencies in the United States. Is this a coincidence? I doubt it very much. And we now wait to see how Putin will react. This is, of course, draining Russia of resources enormously. It's putting huge strain on their economy.
And money as well.
Manpower, directly. Money, but also their economy, which has had to re-gear itself to a war economy, meaning it produces less of what it would need to become competitive in a global context. So Russia is really a problem, and will need to be dealt with very clear signals that NATO is united, that NATO is willing to spend what it needs to spend on the right things, and that it will not tolerate Russian aggression nor reward it.
We'll come to spending in a minute, but just back on that point of what does peace look like, both sides are talking about some form of peace, at least suggesting they want to go towards that front. What could you do to allow Ukraine not to lose face, to feel they've lost if the line is drawn and those territorial gains are given really to Russia?
Well, it's difficult to see a scenario, I think, where Ukraine takes back all the territory it's lost. But therefore the price for Putin has to be a security guarantee for Ukraine that any further Russian incursion into Ukraine would be met with a much sterner response than was found this time. That takes us back to the situation, of course, of how do you do that? And does the West have the moral strength that it had in the Cold War to actually face up to an adversary that has a very different view of the world?
Let's look at that in two ways, the UK and also NATO. But the UK first. John Healey has been pretty firm on this, as has Keir Starmer, standing with Ukraine against Russia. But the problem they've got is getting to 2.5% of GDP spent on defence. We have no timescale for that. We may get one in the coming year.
Well, we've got, I'm afraid, a bit of a nonsense. You've got Lord Robertson carrying out the defence review, which I think will be very thorough, knowing George Robertson, but it's being done in a vacuum because there's no spending review from the Treasury. So they don't know exactly what they will have to play with. I know that because I've been there in the same situation back in 2010.
Yeah.
And all you can do then...
What you learned from that? I remember planes being cut up on the tarmac in full view of the cameras. It looked awful, frankly, on a PR basis.
Well, that was done for a specific reason, that this was a failed project.
Nimrod was it?
It was Nimrod 2000. This was 2010. Okay. It had had one flight, and that one flight had been actually grounded for pilot safety. And it was a piece of nonsense to continue spending. So you have to be actually very firm with the programmes that you have to manage a defence budget, and that's what we inherited in 2010, was a dire situation. But nonetheless, you've also got to be willing to spend what you need to spend. Defence is not discretionary spending like, you know, our welfare bill or education or so on. We have to spend what we need to spend, given the state of the world, to keep our country and our people safe. And I don't think that we're doing that at the present time. The situation in terms of security has deteriorated hugely. In the past decade or so, we've not met that. So not only do they need to put that defence figure up quite considerably, maybe above 2.5%. The Americans are talking about 3.5% for European NATO countries as a percentage of GDP. But how quickly can it be done, and how will it fit into the rest of spending? Given the government's competence on numbers so far, I've got absolutely no confidence in their economic ability. But the bigger question, I think, is what does NATO look like? And are European NATO countries willing to spend on their own security? Or are they always going to expect American taxpayers to pick up the bill?
That's exactly what Trump might be saying after January the 20th.
And he's not the first. I remember sitting around the NATO table with Robert Gates, who was the American Defence Secretary, saying at that point that there was the risk, if Europe constantly underspends, that an American president or a Congress would emerge that simply said, pay for your own expenditure on defence, don't expect Americans to pick up the tab. And you know, if Europe doesn't understand that now, it's never going to understand it. Many more countries do, and having Mark Rutte as the Sec Gen for NATO, I think, gives us a strong figurehead there.
We'll wait and see how the German elections also, how they land. That could be quite interesting on defence spending. Just back to the UK, we're looking at headlines here. The Mail on Sunday, Kemi's furious TV chiefs, that's GB News, favouring Nigel Farage. He has a show. You went toe-to-toe with Farage when you were in the Cabinet Minister for the Tories and a senior Tory politician for 3 decades. How would you take on the threat of Farage? Would you have this kind of go toe-to-toe with him on membership numbers and the like?
Politics is not about where you are in the polls or membership numbers or anything else. It comes to the big issues. How would you handle Ukraine? How would you handle Iran? What are you doing in a very dangerous world to ensure that we protect ourselves and maintain the quality of our public services? This is froth. And it's Christmas froth, perhaps can be forgiven for that. You don't go about politics or marketing in any sort by talking about the brands of your opponents. Mrs. Thatcher used to say that we avoid external coalitions in this country by maintaining internal coalitions. Kemi Badenoch's got to build that traditional Conservative coalition that Mrs. Thatcher built that covers the whole country and all social groups in the country. That means setting out a programme that is relevant. We'll not be refighting the 2024 election, which everyone seems to still be doing. We'll be fighting an election in 28 or 29 after 4 or 5 years of a failed socialist government when people recognise again the price of socialism.
Is there a vacuum, do you think? You ran for leadership, I think, twice, in the Tories when you were MP.
Yeah, I was robbed.
But is there a vacuum here? We haven't heard really any firm commitments here from Kemi Badenoch. She will reverse the VAT increase on private schools next Wednesday, but otherwise there's not much from her. And I wonder if into that vacuum Farage is making hay.
Well, I think it's very clear the Conservatives are improving position once again. The polls are telling us that.
Yeah.
Labour are losing votes. Farage seems to be picking up a number of those. None of these are uncommon pictures early on in a parliament, and I think that people just need
somewhere away.
They just need to take a deep breath before we get to New Year, and we need to know, if not specific policies, we need to know the general direction. My advice to Kemi is to get a copy of Mrs. Thatcher's 1979 manifesto, very clear on the direction for Britain, the sort of Britain we wanted to see, not detailed on policy, and it was the prelude to 4 consecutive general election majority wins.
I should say a GB spokesman has said the meeting that took place between GB News bosses and Kemi Badenoch took place without any acrimony and was very constructive. But just finally on Labour, Liam Fox, what do they need to do to get the economy growing? You're going to say cut taxes, and I'm sure you are as a Thatcherite Tory. But what do they need to do to try and get the economy going? The election won't be for 4.5 years or so.
You cannot create wealth and economy in an economy by attacking the wealth creators. If you start to put up tax on employers, you're attacking the creation of wealth. If you start putting up taxes on things like what people inherit, then you're attacking the wealth itself. Attacking wealth creators, attacking wealth itself is not the way to improve the wealth of your economy. And ultimately, as we found out with every Labour government since the war, the consequences tend to be higher unemployment. No Labour government has ever left office with lower unemployment than it started with. We're in danger of creating inflation all over again, and we've got the politics of spite and envy at the centre of government. Well, that's if you exclude incompetence.
Okay. Well, Liam Fox, former Defence Secretary and former Tory MP, thank you for joining us again on GB News.
It's a pleasure
to see you. Thank you. Now, coming up with the fighting between Kemi Badenoch and Nigel Farage intensifying, I'm joined by Reform UK's mayoral candidate in Lincolnshire, Dame Andrea Jenkins. This is the Camilla Tominey Show with me, Christopher Hope, on GB News.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
The birth rate in Britain has sunk to 1.49, well below replacement rate. Yet policies pursued by both major parties are still to spend huge sums to encourage parents back to their work when their children are still at preschool age. Should we not be helping parents to spend longer at home, asks his new book, whilst recognising that in an age of sex equality, the question is fraught. David Goodhart joins me now.
We undervalue the domestic realm, and that
has led to lots of the most negative trends in British society. About half of children in the UK are not living with both of their biological parents by the age of 14. We have, of families with dependent children, about 24–25% are single-parent households. Mainly mothers, and they're doing valiant work. But of course, it means you don't have the investment in children that a two-parent family can give. I mean, the reason why it's a care dilemma is that a lot of these negative trends are also kind of intimately related to positive things, like that movement of women into work, the fact that women are no longer so defined by marriage and motherhood, the fact that women and men are freer to leave unhappy relationships. And the challenge for modern liberal societies is, how we hold on to those freedoms but get a better balance, which means, I think, investing more in the domestic realm. We spend a total now of £9 billion on childcare subsidies. Why not give that subsidy direct to young parents so they could then choose whether to subsidise themselves, as it were, to be able to afford to stay at home, or to give it to a nursery, or to give it to granny, or to to keep it in the home.
GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
And we're back now. Camilla Badenoch's feud with Nigel Farage has escalated over the weekend over claims that she urged bosses of this channel, GB News, to cut the airtime given to Reform UK leader Nigel Farage. That's according to the front page of the Mail on Sunday, as you can see. They claim in their reports that during the meeting with the channel's chief executive, Camilla Badenoch said that GB News should not be, quotes, a haven for my critics. I'm joined now by Reform UK's mayoral candidate for Lincolnshire, Dame Andrea Jenkins. Dame Andrea, welcome to the show. Great to see you and Happy New Year to you. What on earth do you make of this? Why is your former leader, Camilla Badenoch, engaging in a fight with Nigel Farage?
I mean, I think it was rather immature, if I'm honest. And I don't quite believe the Conservative figures. If I can just look at, my old seat of Morley, we went from 450 seats, actually, 450 members down to 100 members after what happened to Boris and Liz. So if that, Christopher, is echoed across the country, I'd be very surprised if it's anywhere near the 130,000 that,
Yeah, I should explain to... I should explain to viewers and listeners, 130,000 or so of the membership tally announced by the Tory party at the time they announced Camilla Badenoch as leader. And now Reform UK claim they've got 150,000 members, so that allows Reform to say they're a bigger party. But no, I think the Tories wouldn't be questioning that. Their figures, they would claim, I'm sure, are audited, as does Reform UK. I just wonder why this battle's taking place, because Reform UK have 5 MPs, the Tories have 121 MPs, and Reform UK is the 8th biggest party or grouping in Parliament. The Tories are the 2nd. Why on earth are the Conservatives so worried about a tiny party like Reform?
Well, they're worried because they realise that the more activists you get, the more leaflets get delivered, the more your messaging gets out there. I mean, do you see the poll today, which is the headlines, Reform, they could take 17 seats in Yorkshire, including my old seat, including Ed Miliband's. And so they're clearly worried. But But to me, besides, Robert Jenrick, I think is doing a better job than Kemi actually of holding Labour to account. But Nigel and the 5 MPs are doing a far better job than the whole of the Conservative Party at the moment in holding Labour to account. And so I think that's probably why they're getting worried. And regarding your point you just made, previously about them writing to the channel or contacting the channel GB News. I got it on good authority that the candidate who's standing against me for the Conservative Party has also put complaints in to not just yourself but to other TV stations where I go on, and we're not even in the short campaign. So it does seem to be filtering down even to my campaign, Christian.
And I should say, we are really keen to have anyone on from any parties, Labour MPs, Labour candidates, whoever.
Well, you do,
and we're
don't
constantly
you?
asking for that. I should say a GB News spokesman said the meeting took place between GB News and Cavan Badenoch without any acrimony and was very constructive. Also, while we've been on air, the Tories have sent us a statement too to read out to you. Reform has delivered, the Tories say, a Labour government that has cruelly cut winter fuel payments for 10 million pensioners, put the future family farming and food security at risk, and launched a devastating raid on jobs which will leave working people paying the price. A vote for reform this coming May is a vote for a Labour council. Only the Conservatives can stop this. So, Dame Andrew, the suggestion here from the Tories is that reform and support for reform simply help Labour stay in power.
But I think that's actually got very arrogant now. And I mean, I did even say during my election, I'm a Democrat and, smaller parties have the right to exist. And even though the party was putting that out during the election campaign, they've got every right to exist. We're a democracy and the movement's growing. And I think it actually shows that they're going about this the wrong way. Instead of attacking Reform, who's actually hoovering up a lot of their members, they should be thinking, right, we want strong leadership here. We want to bring these members back. I mean, Kemi's interview on Radio 4 was a prime example of this, Christopher. Look how she said, Andrea Jenkins doesn't like me, like we're in the playground. I don't have any feeling one way or another as her as a person. I don't think she's a very good leader. That's completely different. What she should have said is, it's a shame when any Conservative, former member of parliaments or elected officials leave the party, but I will bring strong leadership and actually ensure we bring people back. But this is why Reform, actually, and Nigel, Richard, all of the team, they are speaking sense. They're actually speaking to the heart of what people are thinking. They are saying the things that people want us to say.
Have you been in touch with Kemi Badenoch? I mean, she seemed to say that you don't like her. I mean, do you like Kemi Badenoch?
Well, that's what I just said. I don't have a feeling one way or another about it. I mean, as a person, she's probably okay. But as a leader, I did say I'd leave the Conservative Party. She became leader because she wouldn't rip up the last of the EU laws on the statute, Christopher, because, it was in her remit. And I'm a passionate Democrat, and that's why I fought so hard for Brexit. And I feel that, unfortunately, Kemi's rhetoric is all hot air, but her background in what she's done in Parliament does not prove that she delivers. So it's not about her as a person, it's about her as a leader.
Do you not think,
the only leader we've got what's strong is Nigel.
Yes, Nigel Farage, you would say that. Others would disagree with that, but of course.
Yes.
I mean, is Reform not in the box seat because you've had 14 years of the Tories, by the end, frankly, failing on a number of measures, not least increasing the tax burden and not cutting net migration or illegal migration, and then Labour's had a bumpy start with no growth in the last quarter, and that leaves the door wide open to someone like Reform UK, which has never got near power and can offer simple solutions to complex issues. I mean, is that not where we are? Simply the party that you're now supporting is offering untested and simplistic ideas to win support.
Look, I think, don't underestimate Reform. Look what happened in Canada. They ended up becoming the bigger party, didn't they? And then I think both parties came together eventually in the end. But no, I've met with the whole team so many times. We have daily conversations, and we're going to have a powerful manifesto, which I'm going to in Lincolnshire as well. I've been even working on it the last few days, which actually speaks to the heart of the people.
Yeah.
I think what's happened is, party members left the Conservative Party with what they did to Boris, what they did to Liz, and then they see that they have a leader who's not really saying much, and so they're still coming to us. But I want to take the fight to Labour as well now, Christopher. We've seen these polling about Yorkshire, and we could take Lincolnshire mayoral, we could take the one around the Hull area, and so I think we need to send a message to both the major parties. Look, neither of you are safe. The British public want reform, and they want common sense politics, and that's what we will bring.
You mentioned forecast gains there for Reform. There's polling in today's Sunday Times giving Reform UK, were an election held now and it won't be for 4 years, 72 seats. The Tories, 222 seats. Labour, 228 seats. That suggests that if Reform in the UK did form an alliance, they could run the country from 2029. You mentioned Canada. Can a deal be done here? I mean, shouldn't these two right-centre parties be coming together to take on Labour and the Lib Dems? And are you urging that internally in Reform UK?
No, I'm not. If you remember, Christopher, we've had conversations, haven't we, on your shows over the last 18 months. I was trying to bring both parties together before the election to take the fight to the socialists. But I think now it's actually gone too far, and what Kemi did in actually virtually accusing Nigel of fraud, I think that's actually trampled on any potential relationship. Not that there was going to be one anyway, but I think that's, rhetoric like that doesn't help matters. But I think what we've seen with his 150,000 members in that short space of time, we are a movement, and still 4.5 years away from election. We can pull from Labour and Conservatives as well. Then we can become the governing party.
On those 150,000 members, are they all in the UK? Are they all voters who can vote here, or are they all around the world? Because some of the memberships are being signed up in the small hours of the morning.
Well, I mean, look, I'm an insomniac. I was sort of writing my campaign plan at 2 a.m. in the morning this morning, Christopher. So, I understand the parties had the verifiers in, so you'd have to ask them that, but I couldn't see why it would not be, to be honest.
Yeah. And just finally, I guess the one party delighted with this battling on the right of politics is Sir Keir Starmer, because the polling is bad for him. There's no growth in the economy. He's trying to get regulators to try and cut regulation to improve the economy. It was a bright spot for him, really, in a difficult set of headlines this Sunday.
Yes, and this is why I've only tweeted last night, actually, and this morning, Christopher, about taking the fight to the Labour heartlands, because they should be our next target. And so I think, watch this space, we will be taking some seats off Labour as well in the council elections. That's if they go ahead, unless the Conservative and Labour-led councils try to stop these elections with what's coming from central government. But I think you'll be some surprising results in there.
Well, Dame Andrea Jenkins, the mayoral candidate for Reform UK in Greater Lincolnshire, thank you for joining us today on GB News. Now, coming up, after one of the biggest international and political years we've seen for a while, we'll be looking back at how things have panned out via the world of cartoons. This is the Camilla Tominey Show with me, Christopher Hope, on GB News.
Looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello there, welcome to your latest winter sun forecast. Well, as we see out 2024, it's going to remain fairly unsettled for parts of Cyprus and Greece. This area of cloud and rain continues to linger here. But for much of Italy, Spain and Portugal, a fairly quiet couple of days with some late winter sunshine here. A few showers for Madeira, maybe just creeping into Canaries. But as we approach New Year's Day itself, it should be fairly fine and dry across the Canaries.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. Well, as we move into 2025, the weather is certainly turning much more unsettled across the country. A risk of some disruption in places as areas of low pressure move in. But at the moment, we still have high pressure across the south, keeping things fairly settled here. But weather fronts already providing plenty of rain across Scotland. And if anything, as we go through the course of the evening, that rain intensifies across parts of Scotland. Also, could just see some snow beginning to fall across the higher ground. Further south, a fairly quiet night to come, albeit rather cloudy, but that cloud cover will generally give us a fairly mild night. Although some clearer skies across the very far south, we could see lows here of around 3 to 5 degrees. So if we start Monday morning across Scotland, it's going to be a wet and potentially snowy start for some of us. Warnings are in force right throughout Monday, and that will continue into New Year's Eve and potentially New Year's Day too. So if you do have any Hogmanay travel plans, do stay up to date with the latest warnings. The rain also beginning to move into parts of Northern Ireland and Northern England too, but the further south you are, generally a dry start with maybe a few glimmers of sunshine. But for most of us, really, it's going to be a fairly cloudy Monday. The best of any brightness really will be reserved across the far south. But even here, we could just see a few showers develop. But for Scotland especially, a very wet picture here, although the far northwest may well just turn a little bit drier as we move into the afternoon. Mild for most of us, but up across the far north, we're just starting to see this cold air just begin to move a bit further south. So a pretty cold afternoon to come for much of northern Scotland. Into the evening, another band of rain then begins to move into Scotland, so turning wet once again with, risk of some snow in places. Remaining fairly quiet for the time being across the south, but for all of us as we move into 2025, it's turning unsettled with the risk of some wind, rain and potentially snow.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Camilla and Tominey Show with me, Christopher Hope. Now, the Imperial War Museum is commemorating 150 years since Sir Winston Churchill's birth with a captivating new exhibition exploring his life through political cartoons. So, after one of the more eventful years in our political history, what did 2024 look like in cartoons? We're joined now by the multi-award-winning political cartoonist, Christian Adams. Christian, great to see you.
Morning.
Happy New Year. And now you draw, of course, back with The Telegraph.
That's right.
It's been quite a year, hasn't it? Which cartoons would you pull out?
The great thing is that there was the surprise, almost snap election, really. So that was great because I thought, because summer is usually terrible for cartoonists, because the silly season, nothing is happening politically for a political cartoon. So it's great for us. I mean, it was absolutely brilliant. So that was it. That's sort of topsy-turvy. The highlight of the year was the summer. It's usually the quiet time.
And no one saw it coming. That was involving Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, calling it in a soaking wet Downing Street.
Absolutely, yes. Which couldn't have been worse. He couldn't have planned it worse if he tried.
That's right. And other big issues for you this year, the US election, of course.
Yes. I mean, Trump, whatever you think of Trump, for a political cartoonist, he is absolutely perfect. He's the gift that keeps on giving.
And we're just showing now on screen one of your ones there. It looks like Kamala Harris apparently running away with it, but Biden giving the baton of power to the man with the blonde hairdo.
Exactly, yeah.
I think you'll have fun this year. And how do you draw Trump? You draw him with an enormous tie, do you, and an extraordinary haircut?
Well, it's the extraordinary haircut. I once asked another cartoonist, right at the beginning, however many years ago it was now, I said, so I'm trying to draw his hair. How exactly do you think it goes? And he said, nobody knows. And I'm still staring at his hair, and I have no idea which way it goes or what is happening up there. So I try and draw it, but I make it up. I mean, he makes it up, so I make it up as well.
Yeah, he does draw the eye. I was in Trump Tower for a press conference and asked him a question for GB News back in September, and he just does. You do just want to sort of look at him because you're so familiar with his behaviours on TV, but seeing him in person, tiny feet, I thought, and big hair. That was my conclusion on seeing him in person. Of course, Trump versus Putin is one of the big international rivalries, frankly, this year, and how those two individuals take each other on, particularly over how to deal with the war in Ukraine, is one. And on that camera, we see now, don't we? We have that's a take on Wicked, isn't it, Christian, with Vladimir Putin?
That's it. The Wicked movie had just come out. Exactly. Yeah.
And he's saying he's
that was a couple of weeks ago. I'm just trying to think. I've forgotten what it was. I mean, he's bombed so many people, but it was
he's bombing somewhere, probably Ukraine.
But it was another atrocity. But he blamed it was the West. He really did say it was the West world.
Yeah, it's not quite the wicked West, but it may well have said that. And of course, that is a justification of his special military exercise, as he describes it, in Ukraine, which, of course, is an invasion of Ukraine, frankly, and we're still dealing with the fallout of that. And how that ends, of course, we've got Trump saying he can end it with a peace deal on day one of his premiership when it starts on January the 20th. And how that looks will be something you'll be looking closely at.
It will be. I'm never quite sure whether how seriously to take Trump, because he did say we're going to build a wall and everybody on day one last time. And he did, actually. So, I'm not a politician, so I have no idea what he's going to do about Putin or Ukraine. But I'm there to draw a cartoon about it.
That's right. And, of course, Sir Keir Starmer, he won the election with that landslide. Has he proved difficult to draw?
He's one of those people who's got an extremely boring face to actually draw, but you sort of get used to it. He's got a very high forehead, and very rosy cheeks, and the spectacles help. Spectacles always help everybody. That cartoon there was with the red painting. Everybody, and it was like, can you turn it blue? At the time, people thought he was going to be rather right wing, but that didn't happen, did it?
Yeah, we'll try and go back to that. I think that was your take on the painting of the monarch, King Charles, wasn't it?
That's correct,
and it was a bit red for him. Arguably, though, since the budget, that may have changed. He has gone quite socialist, you'd argue, in his...
No, absolutely, exactly. I got that wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, that was before... I mean, the problem with him was, before the election, he wouldn't say anything. So there was nothing for a cartoonist to grip onto. So the running gag was that he had no policies and wouldn't say anything. So there was nothing else to say about him. Really. There is now. Now he's in power. There's plenty to say about him now.
We played a selection of your other cartoons there involving Rishi Sunak. I mean, he's always quite small when you draw him. Is that what you try and draw out? You draw... There we have him in the rain. I think that must have been in 10 Downing Street.
Well, funnily enough, I drew that before the election. They said, don't have a summer election, it's madness. And I drew him being rained on in summer, and it actually happened.
Yes.
I drew that about 6 weeks before it happened.
Yes. I think your Starmer looks a bit like David Cameron. Is that unfair?
Well, no, that's fine. They both have the slightly privileged rosy cheeks.
Yes.
And they obviously enjoy a good lunch as well by the look at their chin.
I know. And what's come up this next year? Who are you sharpening your pen to draw this coming year?
Well, we've got Camilla. So obviously, she's very easy to draw. She's very featureful face.
Yes.
So it's great, and her hair's great. And of course, again, you keep thinking as a cartoonist, well, I'm never going to draw them again. Like, for example, Cameron, when he resigned, you think, I'll never draw them again. And then I thought, well, you know, Farage is out the picture. I'll never draw him again. A couple of years ago. And now he said he might be Prime Minister in 4 years.
Do you try and find some shorthand to indicate to the reader who you're drawing? So with Farage, is always the fag on his lip or something? And
the fag and the pint, and Trump is the hair. And Boris was the hair. It's great having shortcuts, I'm telling you.
And what's your shortcut for Keir Starmer?
Oh, my God. Well, he's so boring. I don't think there's even a shortcut for him. His hair, I suppose. He's got very manicured.
Are there any in-jokes in your cartoons? I know one colleague of yours on Fleet Street draws an outline, I think, of his wife, I think, in every cartoon he does.
That's Mac, who's been doing that. I wrote to him 40 years ago as a child, obsessed with cartoons, saying, who is that woman in every cartoon? Yeah. And he wrote back to me and he said, thank you so much for your letter. Me and my blonde-haired wife have no idea who you're talking about.
I know, right? So I always try and look for it every single week, and I always find it somehow. It's like but it's been quite an interesting time for you, I think. And how long do these cartoons take for you to draw? And where do you find inspiration, Christian Adams?
It's a day's work, which is fine. You know, I'm not down a mine. It's not the most difficult job in the world, and it takes as long as it takes. And inspiration, that's the age-old question, which I can't answer because I have no idea. But somehow it happens, and it has to happen because I've got a deadline at the end of the day.
And that drives you on. Well, readers and listeners and viewers of GB News and readers of The Telegraph will see your drawings through the year in the Daily Telegraph and Sunday Telegraph. Thanks for joining us today, Christian Adams.
Thanks, Christopher.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
1 in 20 people are diagnosed with seasonal affective disorder across the UK.
Yes, Healthwatch has revealed that men are more likely to suffer from this than women. Did you know?
Triggers apparently include a decrease in daylight hours, which is certainly happening around about now. If you're leaving the office, it's dark. When you come home, it's dark, as well as the falling temperatures.
Yes, and both of those things happen a lot, don't they, here in Britain? So how can we combat the symptoms of seasonal affective disorder? Well, to discuss this, we're joined now by Dr. Andreas Fonseca, the founder and director of Thrive Mental Wellbeing. Really good to see you this morning, Doctor. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Now, there'll be lots of people watching and listening this morning and saying, what a load of rubbish. It's always been cold in this country. It's always been dark. What is seasonal affective disorder? Is it really a thing?
Well, it is a thing, and it's been known for quite some time. This is not new, really. It is a form of depression. That's what it is. And it's got specific characteristics that kind of differentiate it from other forms of depression. So the reason probably we're talking more about it is because it's basically people are more aware of it and they're recognizing it more. So before you used to be sort of just saying this person's got depression, now you have some specific things to look at that can differentiate it from other kinds of depression, which is quite useful because it's got some specific forms of treatment. So the things that are different about seasonal affective disorder are that for the diagnosis you need 2 years in which you only have episodes during either the late autumn or early winter. So that's when they start, and they fade away by late spring, summer. Early summer. So that's how it works. And you cannot have any episodes at any other time. So it has to be seasonal, specifically seasonal.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back. Now, British companies are working together to provide prosthetics for injured children in the war in Gaza. The Restoring Hope initiative employs world-first technology to provide functioning prosthetics in an unprecedented time frame, under 1.5 hours. Edward Hall and Nicholas Mellor join me now from Restoring Hope. As a father of an amputee, that is very quick. Now, how on earth, Edward, do you get these legs fitted so quickly?
Well, this is new technology, new British technology, which is being deployed today, fitting legs within 1.5 hours. So people are up and walking, helping their family back into the community within a very short space of time.
That's extraordinary. And, of course, what's so important, isn't it, in war zones, is getting people mobile quickly and able to look after themselves.
That's right. Not just in war zones, of course, but in everyday life. So the quicker you can get people up and about, the better.
So you've been in Gaza, you've been in Ukraine too. Tell us about that.
It was a strange story, if I could just say, in that we started off in Ukraine. My mother, when she died, had a mobile ambulance, a Berlingo, we took to Ukraine. Nicholas said we should fill it with prosthetic arms. We took arms to Ukraine. We visited 4 hospitals. We trained people to fit those arms, and then
were they NHS arms? Or
no, they were 2 companies. They were Koala, which was a little group that span out of Imperial College, and Nicholas was involved in that. So they span out of Imperial College, British companies fitting arms very quickly. This made a big difference to people, and I think my turning point was as we were sitting with a man, a soldier, who'd lost his arm, who was a guitar player, sitting playing Blackbird.
Yes, by Paul McCartney.
In the corner, absolutely. Just really made such an impression.
So that was back in 2020?
Back in 2023.
Yeah.
And then it was really 6 months later, I was recounting this story to King Abdullah because...
Of Jordan.
Of Jordan. We had a chance to go over and meet with him, his band of brothers. And this was something he took up. Nicholas, why don't you tell us how that made such a difference?
Yeah, Nicholas Mellor, so then that took the project to Gaza.
And with the wonderful support of His Majesty and the Royal Jordanian Army that had a field hospital in Gaza and some of the best prosthetists in the world, they've got an amazing rehabilitation centre there. And Dr. Rami Faraj, the King's doctor, said, well, we need to have legs as well as arms. You know, go out and find the most innovative company is the one out there. And that we brought in a company called Amparo that makes adjustable sockets. And so we've been able to support them providing arms and legs through the Jordanian Field Hospital.
Yes, 250 amputees in Gaza are now walking again as a result of your work, and that's vital. And are you short of legs and arms? I mean, are you asking providers to send used legs and arms to you to go to Gaza or Ukraine?
Well, the great thing now is that we've got the sort of proof of concept. The first team has been in there for 100 days, is just going to be coming out shortly. And the question now is, how can we best scale this up, share the approach with other charities, other hospitals, and that's what we're planning to do in the new year. But we need support to be able to do that. We need actually the funds to pay for the arms and the legs, and then they'll be fitted by the teams that are already there.
It's privately funded at the moment as a charity.
Yes, this was something that was done by His Majesty the King, and then I'm very proud to say that the British government stepped up, and they have part-funded this as well. So we've now got it up and running, and now we've got to find a way of actually building support so that we can really scale and sustain this initiative.
And you're involved in Gaza and Ukraine. Is that putting a stress on the charity, or can you manage that pressure okay?
The plan is to go back to Ukraine. Interestingly, Ukraine wasn't the right moment for us, and we pulled back from Ukraine. We're still doing some work there, but the environment wasn't the right one. It was really with His Majesty's vision and his support that enabled us to sort of move the project forward.
And just how have you got to know the King of Jordan? And not every charity can get his help on things.
It goes back to Sandhurst, a wonderful British military institution where we served together. We became officers together, me and a number of people. And that bond, I think, has made a big difference as one has gone forward. And it really is his vision and his legacy that we're working with. And this has been great. Obviously, for me, having been a soldier who was also injured, it makes it even more poignant. And the opportunity to work with people and give them hope has made a big difference.
And Nicholas, what drew you to helping amputees particularly?
I was originally met this team that was developing these new prosthetics at Imperial College. They asked me to be their chairman. I see there's a huge opportunity now for rethinking, reimagining how we can do it. And we really need to do this for children because actually the whole field of prosthetics is really for adults. If we can do it, children need support through their whole life.
And repeated limbs.
And repeated limbs. And we have a system in place now to do that, to really transform this with children. And we've had amazing support from engineers and designers who have been able to link with the team in the field that actually has envisaged a whole new generation of prosthetic products and services that will be needed for these children. And we've got to make that happen.
Yeah, well, how can listeners and viewers get in touch with your charity? Is there a website?
There is a website, and I think we've got it. The link, which we can.
Okay, I'm sure we can tell our viewers and this is later. Edward Hall and Nicholas Mellor from Restoring Hope, thank you for joining us on GB News. Thanks to all my guests today for joining me on the Camilla Tominey Show. We'll see you all again very soon. Have a great New Year.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. Well, as we move towards the New Year period, the weather is going to be very unsettled. All of us seeing a spell of rain at times and also some strong winds, and in the north could also see some snow. Out there at the moment as we end the Sunday, still got high pressure in the south keeping things settled here, but weather fronts already across Scotland, and as we move through the course of the night, the rain here is going to intensify, some heavy and persistent rain developing, also some snow as it bumps up into some colder air, especially across the northern half of the country. Warnings do come into effect overnight and they'll continue right into the New Year period. So if you do have any travel plans, do stay up to date with the latest warnings. Elsewhere, it's a fairly quiet start to Monday, but as we zoom into Scotland, you can see plenty of rain and also some snow in places. So a very tricky start to the day here. And unfortunately, there's not going to be much improvement in parts of Scotland throughout the course of the day. Some rain also just knocking on the doorsteps of Northern Ireland, maybe some patchy rain also for Northern England. But for the rest of England and Wales, generally a dry start, albeit rather cloudy. But some breaks in the cloud will develop as the winds continue to freshen. Could come quite strong across parts of the Pennines. At times could see some buffeting on the roads here. But really the lion's share of the wind and rain will be across the north. Some colder air also beginning to seep further south across Scotland. So increasingly cold here with, again, risk of some winteriness in places. But further south, it's generally going to be another mild day. And then for New Year's Eve, a very unsettled picture across the north of the country. Further wind, snow and rain warnings in force here. Fairly dry initially across the south, but some of this rain will spread its way south